Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the crooked wooden doors of a place where the stew is always hot, the beds are always lumpy, and nobody minds if you can't chew. Welcome to a medieval inn, not the glamorous kind with fancy banners and sparkling goblets, but the kind you'd stumble into after 3 days of rain-soaked roads smelling like horse and hope. You're tired, your feet ache, and honestly, you've lost more teeth than you'd like to admit. But don't worry, the cook has something special for travelers like you. There's a fire crackling in the hearth, throwing golden light onto wooden beams darkened by centuries of smoke. You shuffle past a pair of snoring men slumped over their ale and find a bench near the warmth. Your stomach grumbles. The innkeeper eyes you mud-splattered jaw, a bit swollen clearly past your chewing prime, and nods knowingly. You won't be gnawing on mutton bones tonight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and what time it is where you're watching. I love seeing how far these sleepy little stories reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't order from a menu here. No one asks for gluten-free or dairy light. You eat what the pot offers, and tonight it's something that smells hearty and humble. A thick soup maybe, or a soft pottage. Your spoon dips in, and it's warm, creamy, with bits that yield without a fight. Welcome to the world of medieval soft foods, where culinary innovation didn't happen in castles, but in places like this roadside inns, dusty monasteries, and smoky taverns. And it wasn't driven by luxury, it was driven by necessity. Because when teeth fall out, or never grow quite right to begin with, you have two options: starve or boil everything to oblivion. Historians still argue whether most commoners truly lived on stale bread and onions, or whether that's just the simplified version of a much mushier truth. Archaeological digs show worn-down molars and jawbones with infections so bad they left holes in the skull. Even young adults showed signs of serious dental decay. Why? Well, the diet didn't help gritty bread sweet wine, and no idea what floss even was. So if your teeth hurt, broke, or simply disappeared, you weren't alone. You were in the majority. Which is probably why so many dishes from the period look like something you'd spoon-feed to a sleepy toddler. Think mushy lentils, overcooked vegetables, milk-soaked grains, and the occasional shred of meat, slow-cooked, until even a medieval knight with a battle-scarred jaw could swallow it without flinching. You probably won't survive this century, by the way. Just a little reality check. The average life expectancy is somewhere between 30 and 40, and you've already seen too many winters. But tonight, you'll eat. Your neighbor at the bench slurps something from a wooden bowl. It's grayish and steaming, and it smells not terrible. Maybe a barley pottage with bits of onion and a bone for flavor. No one's getting seconds of beef tonight. It was boiled hours ago and stripped down to the softest fibers, all tough bits saved for the dogs or the wealthier guests. And yes, there are wealthy guests. Not many, but they sit closer to the hearth on chairs instead of benches. They're served slightly better fare, Perhaps a minced meat pie with mashed root vegetables, but even they don't expect crisp or crunchy. The cook here has one motto: if it can't be chewed, it better melt on the tongue. You sip your drink. It's warm, vaguely sour. Probably weak ale or watered-down mead, safer than the well water, and surprisingly soothing on the gums. No ice, of course, just the warm belly heat of fermentation and time. If you're lucky, there's a hint of spice in there, maybe a clove if the innkeeper has connections. And all around you, people eat with a kind of quiet intensity. No forks, just spoons, hands, and the occasional slurp. Food is survival, not entertainment. Meals are brief, belly-first moments of comfort in a world that rarely gives them. You watch the innkeeper's daughter carry a heavy pot to a traveler hunched over in the corner. He looks even older than you, wrapped in furs, his cheeks sunken. She ladles something into his bowl, a thick, milky porridge with hints of stewed apple. Soft as a sigh, he nods in thanks, but doesn't speak. You wonder if he still can. Not everyone here is toothless, of course. The younger ones still have most of their bite, but even they chew carefully. One bad break, one rotten molar, and they'll be joining the gumming crew soon enough. Dental care is mostly a prayer and a grimace. Still, the food isn't bad. In fact, it's comforting, rich, layered, built on time, more than skill. These are the kind of dishes that don't need teeth. Just patience. Let them linger on your tongue, melt down your throat, carry a bit of warmth to your bones. And as you eat, stories drift through the air like the scent of smoke. Tales of other roads. Other inns of a knight who once ate an entire pigeon pie with only his gums of a widow who makes an almond soup so sweet it makes grown men weep. You laugh, careful not to jostle your aching jaw. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, the stew bubbles. And for now, you're full, you're warm, and you're among the chew-challenged many. You lean back slightly. On the uneven bench, your wooden spoon nestled lazily in your bowl. The fire hisses and cracks beside you, its glow dancing across faces that look more worn than wicked. You think of the warm spoonfuls you've just swallowed and wonder how much of this journey is thanks to the humble soup. The answer, as it turns out, is quite a lot. Soup isn't just a meal in the medieval world. It's salvation. It's health care. It's comfort. It's also the only thing that doesn't fight back when your teeth have called it quits. Inns like this one thrive on it. Big cauldrons, day-long simmering mystery ingredients fished from the bottom of baskets or borrowed from a neighbor's garden. Nothing goes to waste. A knobby carrot here, a scrap of dried onion there, a bone left from yesterday's roast. Add water, add time, and what you get is broth. Life-giving, tooth-hugging broth. And this broth, called potage or pottage, depending on the region, is the medieval MVP. It's endlessly flexible. You can thicken it with barley, soften it with ale, or sweeten it with the milk of a sleepy goat. It absorbs flavors like a soggy miracle. Best of all, you don't need to chew a thing. Some travelers request their broth with soapy-esque chunks of bread soaked into the bowl until they dissolve like overripe fruit. Others prefer it plain and thin, the kind you sip more than spoon. And then there are those who lean toward stews so thick your spoon stands up straight in the bowl like a ship's mast. All of these work for a traveler with no dental confidence. Historians still argue whether soups were truly a peasant dish or if they occasionally showed up on aristocratic tables too. Some say the poor lived on water-thin vegetable broths with almost no substance, while others believe inns were creative enough to serve surprisingly nourishing bowls, especially when you paid a few extra coins. Either way, you'd be lucky to have it bubbling hot in front of you. There's a legend whispered across some old inns in France that monks invented the eternal stew, a pot kept on a slow flame for days or even weeks. Ingredients added and removed endlessly, like some culinary Ouroboros. No one knows what was in it by day 7, but supposedly it cured colds, healed heartbreaks, and put even the gummiest elder into a food coma. That might be stretching it, but there is something almost magical in the way these soups transform scraps into sustenance. You watch the innkeeper lift a ladle, and you can tell he's not just dishing out dinner. He's blending time, patience, and hope. Tonight's soup is thickened with lentils, those tiny legumes that seem designed for edentulous eaters. Lentils don't crunch. They sigh. Simmered long enough, they surrender into velvet. Add a pinch of wild herbs, maybe a sliver of dried meat, and you have something that warms both the belly and the weary parts of your spirit. A small boy shuffles past your table, carrying 2 bowls carefully in his arms. He has the cautious gait of someone who's done this many times. He stops at an old woman wrapped in a shawl, her eyes milky with age. She nods, accepts the bowl, and dips her fingers directly into the broth. No spoon, no shame. Just hunger and habit. You wonder how many of your fellow diners are here precisely because their teeth have given up on them. Probably more than you think. And not just old folks either. Gum disease, abscesses, and childhood malnutrition mean even teenagers might be nursing mushy diets. One wrong bite of crusty bread and it's back to soft porridge until the swelling dies down or until someone brave enough pulls the offending tooth with a hot iron and prayer. Let's be honest if you're a traveler. In this century, you don't carry a toothbrush. You might carry a twig chewed to a fray or a cloth rubbed over the gums. But oral hygiene is more suggestion than science. That lovely stew in your bowl, it's also doubling as your dental plan. Some inns even specialize in it. Hospices along pilgrimage routes were known to serve thin herbal broths to those too sick or fragile to eat anything else. These weren't just meals, they were medicine, garlic for strength, parsley for digestion, leeks for, well, no one's quite sure, but leeks showed up in everything. In fact, leek soup was so iconic that Welsh soldiers once wore leeks in their hats as a badge of pride. Whether or not it helped in battle is still up for debate, but at least their breath kept enemies at a distance. And that's another thing, soft food doesn't have to be bland. Tonight's broth might carry the faint zest of vinegar, a dash of mustard seed, or even a pinch of saffron if someone raided a spice merchant's satchel. You wouldn't expect fire in such a gentle dish, but sometimes it's there lurking beneath the warmth, like a secret. A merchant across the room blows gently on his spoon, muttering something in Flemish. He raises his bowl to the air like a toast and grins a toothless grin. You raise yours back. Across languages, across centuries, soup understands. There's comfort in the steam rising from your bowl, a small cloud of warmth and aroma curling like a soft exhale toward the rafters. Above you, dried herbs dangle from the beams, rosemary, thyme, maybe even marjoram. They aren't just decorations, they're the spice rack of the ceiling. The cook tugs a sprig down now and then, tossing it into the pot like a whispered spell. You sip slowly. Every mouthful tastes like something lived in, like something stirred by hands who knew struggle, who knew loss, who knew what it was to eat without chewing and still feel full. You don't miss your teeth, not tonight. Not with broth this forgiving and a bench this warm. The bowl is nearly empty now, just a shallow puddle of warmth left behind. You cradle it for a moment longer, letting the last of the steam soothe your face. It smells like thyme and barley and stories you weren't around to hear. All around you, spoons clink softly against wood, a quiet percussion in the symphony of digestion. But the inn isn't done with you yet. Not by a long shot. As your host clears away the bowls with the efficiency of someone who's done this every night for 30 years. Your eyes wander to the table beside the hearth. A different dish is being served there, one with an oddly familiar shape. A heap of something pale, creamy, and slightly trembling. Is that mashed turnip? It is. Mashed root vegetables are the unsung heroes of the medieval no-teeth diet. Turnips, parsnips, and sometimes even sweet apples, all boiled to surrender, then pounded into a submission so soft it could be eaten by a sleeping monk. And here's the thing, people didn't just mash food because it was easy. They mashed it because it stretched it. One small turnip, when beaten and seasoned, could be made to feel like a feast. Add a bit of butter if you're lucky, or a splash of broth from the eternal pot, and suddenly you've got a scoop of something that doesn't just fill you up. It tricks your brain into thinking you're being treated. Mashed peas? Absolutely. Mashed chestnuts? If you're near the forest and it's the right season. Mashed beans? Only if you don't mind the repercussions. Medieval ventilation was mostly wishful thinking. Historians still argue whether medieval cooks aimed for flavor or just survival. But these humble mashups suggest a little of both. Sure, you were trying to get the most out of what little you had, but you were also trying to make it palatable, especially when half your mouth episode and your jaw clicked like old hinges. A friar once claimed mashed leeks in milk could cure melancholy. Another swore by beetroot porridge for sore gums. There's no proof either worked, but they kept showing up on tables, which means people kept believing in them, or maybe they just didn't have any better ideas. Your spoon is replaced with a small wooden knife now, but it's ceremonial more than practical. The food coming out of the kitchen wouldn't put up a fight even if you begged it to. You eye the new dish, a pasty, flaky crust with a soft filling of stewed greens and egg. It's barely warm, slightly jiggly, and perfect for sliding down the hatch without a single chew. Pies like this were common in inns, especially for travelers who needed something solid but forgiving. The crusts, usually hard and meant more for structure than consumption, but if the baker's kind or forgetful, you might get a soft one barely holding together. Inside, it's whatever the cook could get cheap and cook slow. Spinach, sorrel nettles, things that grew fast, cost little, and boiled into submission with a bit of patience and salt. The merchant beside you tears a piece of crust with his fingers, then scoops the filling with it like a makeshift spoon. He offers a crooked smile, half his teeth missing, and says something you don't quite catch. You nod anyway. There's a quiet fraternity here, those who have graduated from the age of chewing. Out back, a pig squeals. Probably tomorrow's stew. For now, it's just another sound in the background, along with the huff of bellows, the low mumble of firewood turning into smoke, and the rhythmic creak of old beams under heavy boots. And just when you think you've tasted everything soft imaginable, the innkeeper's daughter surprises you with something sweet. A small cup filled with a thick liquid, the color of honeyed dusk. She sets it down gently, like it might break if touched too hard. You lift it, sniff, and taste. It's a custard, spiced smooth and warm, made with egg's milk and something vaguely fruity. Maybe dried plums stewed and pressed. It glides across your tongue like a lullaby in food form. These were the quiet luxuries of medieval inns, small tender offerings meant not to impress, but to comfort. Custards, rice puddings, or soft cheese folded into mashed fruit. Nothing that needed molars. Everything that whispered, "You've made it through the road. You deserve this." Not every inn could afford eggs or sugar, of course, but clever cooks knew how to cheat sweetness with dried apples honey or just at very long cooking times. You'd be amazed what caramelized onions can do when you've forgotten what cake tastes like. And here's something oddly lovely. In some regions, the softest foods were reserved not for the frail or sick, but for honored guests. Why? Because ease and effortlessness were signs of care. Chewing was for animals. Savoring was for nobility. So if you're here with your jaw barely holding it together, you can pretend just for tonight that it's not necessity, it's luxury. The custard disappears far too quickly, leaving behind only a trace of spice and a contented sigh. You stretch your legs beneath the table and realize the bench doesn't feel quite so hard anymore. Or maybe it's just the food doing its work. There's a comfort in these meals, not just in the eating, but in the knowing that someone boiled and stirred and mashed and ladled all so that you, a traveler with a crooked back and missing teeth, could feel like a person again. You don't need teeth to belong here. You just need a spoon and maybe a story or two. You push your empty cup forward with the kind of satisfaction that only warm custard can bring. Around you, the tap room buzzes with a soft, sleepy energy, the lull that comes after a hearty meal when bellies are full and conversations drift like chimney smoke. You let your fingers trace lazy patterns in a spill on the table, half listening to the scrape of bowls and the distant murmur of hooves outside. Someone at the hearth coughs. Not the delicate kind, but the deep bark-like sound of lungs that have seen too many winters. You glance over and see a man wrapped in layers of rough wool, a mug in one hand, the other massaging his jaw as if hoping it'll behave again. You know that look. Toothache in the Middle Ages wasn't just inconvenient, it was nearly apocalyptic. No dentists, no anesthesia, no numbing gel in cute plastic tubes. If your tooth decided to go rogue, your best option was to wait it out, or have it yanked with a pair of iron tongs and a firm prayer, preferably after a few cups of ale or a blow to the head. That's where medicinal food came in. You didn't just eat to survive. You ate to soothe, to numb, to distract. And inns, especially, the more experienced ones, often served up dishes, not just for hunger, but for healing. In fact, your hostess approaches now with a bowl you didn't ask for. It's steaming and pale, with an herby scent that tickles your sinuses. She sets it before you and gives a simple nod. Milk broth, she says, as if that explains everything. And it sort of does. Milk broth was one of those all-purpose comfort foods handed down by grandmothers and traveling friars. Equal parts sustenance and superstition. It was warm milk blended with herbs like sage, or marjoram thickened with ground oats, or a splash of ale, and sometimes stirred with a hot poker to infuse it with vigor. You take a sip and it's strange. Soft, yes, gentle, but there's a hint of bitterness under the cream, something green and medicinal. It doesn't taste good exactly, but it tastes like it means well. Historians still argue whether recipes like this were truly curative or just symbolic. Some claim the herbs had real antiseptic properties. Others say it was all about belief. If you thought sage milk would quiet your aching molars, sometimes it did. There's something charmingly desperate about medieval health food. People believed in the power of warm things, warm drinks, warm compresses, warm porridge poured down the throat like a mother's lullaby. And for the edentulous who couldn't bite or chew or gnash anything more solid than a whisper, these warm dishes weren't just meals, they were lifelines. Even more creative concoctions show up in old records. Soft jellies made from boiled calves' feet for the wealthy. Bread soaked in ale until it forgets it was ever bread for the rest of us. One account speaks of egg posset, a mix of hot milk eggs, and sweet wine stirred until it curdled into a soft mess that soothed both teeth and tempers. And then there were the teas, not tea like you know it with cute sachets and lemon wedges. Medieval teas were more like grassy potions. Chamomile, yarrow, elderflower, all brewed for aches and nerves and stubborn gum infections. You sip a cup not because it's tasty, but because Sister Mary in the next village said it once cured a boy who bit into a rock pretending it was cheese. There's an elderly woman to your right, her fingers wrapped around a mug of something dark and steaming. She raises it in a slow toast, then downs it like a knight at court. Mead ale bone broth laced with garlic, hard to say. But whatever it is, she's still upright, which in this century is proof enough that it's working. The innkeeper's dog, an old shaggy thing with more attitude than teeth, shuffles over to your bench and collapses with a sigh. He knows the kitchen smells. He knows the soft food usually means leftovers. He also knows which travelers drop the most scraps. You sneak him a spoonful of your milk broth. He licks it once, then sneezes. Fair enough. There's something profoundly communal about this place. Every bowl of soup, every mash of parsnip, or whisper of wine-cooked grain, it all connects you. To the cook, to the land, to the past. And to every other weary traveler who sat here hoping their teeth wouldn't betray them mid-bite. You overhear two men at the next table debating the benefits of honey. One swears it heals infected gums if applied nightly. The other insists it only attracts bees. They both may be right or wrong. In this world, food is knowledge, and knowledge is often sticky and full of holes. But there's no denying that some foods really did help. Soft cheese mixed with garlic was a popular poultice. Boiled onions could be mashed into a balm. Porridge wasn't just breakfast, it was compress medicine and miracle, and always served warm. You swirl the last of the milk broth in your bowl and let the warmth sit in your chest for a while. Out the window, night has wrapped itself tightly around the countryside. A mist creeps low over the fieldstone fences. Someone strikes a match, lighting another candle near the wall, and as your teeth rest safely in the quiet of your mouth, no biting, no aching, no reminders of their fragility, you take comfort in this strange, kind century, where even the simplest inn with its drafts and its dogs and its eternally simmering pot knows how to feed someone who can't chew, not because it's noble, but because it's necessary. Because in a world where your next meal might depend on how far you can walk and how quietly you suffer food that asks nothing of your teeth is a rare kind of mercy. You smile gently, of course. No need to test fate. The warmth from the fire casts gentle flickers across the room, painting soft shadows on the worn wooden benches where weary travelers sit, nursing their bowls. You lean back and feel the rough grain of the bench beneath your fingers, solid, reliable, and a little bit scratchy, much like the inn itself. Outside, the wind hums softly through the eaves, rustling leaves like a whispered lullaby, inviting you to slow down and settle into the slow rhythm of the evening. You glance down at your hands. They're calloused, marked by the long journey you've made, and they remind you that for many travelers like yourself, hands did much of the work once done by teeth. If your mouth no longer manages to chew your hands, become your assistants, softening, breaking, and preparing food in ways that save you from the battle of biting and gnashing. Bread, the medieval staple, is notoriously difficult for those with no teeth. Its crust is like a small challenge, daring you to bite into its tough armor. And even the soft crumb inside can resist surrender, pushing you to chew beyond what's comfortable or even possible. This is why many inns would serve what was called pottage, a thick, forgiving stew that was both humble and essential. You dip your spoon into a bowl of pottage at the next table, savoring the comforting warmth it offers. Thick but not heavy. The stew holds a softness that feels like a gentle hug for your insides. You taste the earthiness of root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, maybe some onion slow cooked with a few grains and a whisper of herbs. It's hearty enough to nourish, yet tender enough to slide down without trouble. Pottage was the medieval traveler's loyal companion. It wasn't a single recipe, but a whole family of stews adapted to what the land and season could provide. In some places, lentils or beans enriched it, adding creaminess and protein. Elsewhere, wild garlic, savory, or thyme lent a subtle fragrance that lifted the flavor without overpowering. And on rare occasions, cured meats like smoked bacon or ham would sneak in a small smoky secret in the pot. But the story of pottage isn't just about flavor. Some inns served it as a kind of medicine, believing it could soothe weak stomachs or calm aching gums. Sometimes cooks stirred in a bit of honey or vinegar, balancing sweetness and sharpness to aid digestion or fight infection. These choices reflected the medieval blend of cooking and healing, where food was both nourishment and remedy. Historians still argue whether the medicinal recipes truly cured ailments or merely offered comfort to the sick and weary. Either way, for travelers who could no longer rely on their teeth, pottage was more than sustenance. It was a gentle luxury, soft, warm, and easy to consume, helping to bridge the difficult gap between hunger and healing. Nearby, an elderly man with a weathered face shares a story with a small group. His teeth long gone, he recounts a youthful brawl, gone wrong, a slippery floor, a misplaced punch, and the inevitable loss of his molars. His audience listens with sympathetic chuckles, the kind that come from shared understanding and the relief that your troubles aren't yours alone. You smile quietly to yourself. Losing teeth might be a blow, but losing your sense of humor would be far worse. The inn's atmosphere thickens with camaraderie, the kind that grows in places where people gather not just for food, but for company stories and shared experiences. The dog, a scruffy old thing with missing teeth of its own, curls up by the hearth, its breath slow and even. The fire's crackle seems to settle into a gentle rhythm, matching the soft murmur of voices and the occasional clatter of spoons against bowls. You feel a warm sense of connection to the past, to the travelers who once sat here, and to the comforting traditions that shaped this place. Overheard nearby is a discussion about the best ways to soften dried fruits for those who can't chew, soaking them overnight in wine or water until they become tender enough to eat. It's a small practical tip, but one that carries the weight of generations. These methods were how people survived on the road, adapting to their changing bodies and limited resources. You reflect on how the needs of travelers without teeth influenced not just menus, but the very culture of hospitality. Inns weren't just places to eat, they were places to heal, to adapt, and to share knowledge. Recipes passed down not only filled stomachs, but soothed aches and kept spirits alive. You dip your spoon once more into the pottage, savoring the thick warmth and the soft promise it holds. It's a quiet moment, but one full of meaning, a reminder of resilience, care, and the gentle art of nourishment when teeth no longer serve. As the night deepens, the inn's cozy glow wraps around you like a blanket. The stories and soft laughter mix with the scent of wood smoke and herbs, fading slowly into the background hum of a world that never quite sleeps. You take one last slow sip, letting the warmth settle deep inside. Here, in this simple inn, with its rough walls and tender food, you are reminded that survival isn't just about teeth or strength. Sometimes it's about softness, kindness, and the quiet comfort of a warm bowl shared among friends. Dawn creeps softly into the inn's low windows, spilling pale light over the rough stone walls and worn wooden floorboards. You awaken slowly, wrapped in a coarse woolen blanket, the comforting scent of burning wood mingling with the faint aroma of morning herbs and spiced ale lingering in the air. The inn's early stirrings murmured conversations, The scrape of pots and pans, a clink of ceramic, beckon you gently out of sleep. You sit up, stretching limbs stiff from the previous day's travel, and feel a familiar ache in your mouth. Soft foods again. For travelers with missing teeth, mornings were never about biting into crusty bread or crisp apples, but about soothing the senses with gentle, warm fare. Today, as often, your breakfast comes as a steaming bowl of gruel. Gruel, a humble dish, is simple, yet deeply nourishing, made by boiling oats or barley in water or milk until the grains swell and soften into a creamy porridge-like consistency. It's nothing fancy, but that's exactly the point. It's soft, warm, and easy to swallow. The medieval innkeeper understands this well, knowing that many guests require meals that won't challenge their tired or toothless mouths. But don't imagine gruel as bland or joyless. Sometimes honey is drizzled over the top, adding a sweet caress to the earthy grains. Dried fruits, raisins, currants, or figs, often soaked overnight to soften their skins, mingle with the grains, bringing bursts of flavor and a subtle chew that even toothless travelers can enjoy. Occasionally, a pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg infuses the pot, lending warmth and a hint of spice that feels like a secret indulgence on a cold morning. You lift your spoon and take a slow sip, feeling the smooth heat settle into your belly like a gentle wave. There's a comfort here that's about more than just calories. This soft, yielding texture is a quiet embrace, a moment of rest after the harshness of the road. Gruel was the backbone of many medieval breakfasts, not just for the toothless, but for travelers in general. Inns took pride in their ability to provide hearty, digestible meals to all guests. You overhear the innkeeper explaining to a fellow traveler how a good gruel could fortify the weak and ease the troubled stomach, a vital start to any journey. A curious detail emerges in some places. Gruel wasn't just food, it was medicine. Medieval cooks sometimes prepared it with specific herbs thought to calm nerves or reduce inflammation. Some historians still debate whether these supposed remedies truly worked or were simply comforting traditions passed down through generations. Either way, the soothing warmth of gruel gave weary travelers a kind of reassurance that medicine alone couldn't provide. As you savor each bite, the bustling inn begins to come alive. The clatter of kitchenware rises, mingling with the chatter of early risers. The smell of fresh-baked bread mingles with roasting meat, tempting noses, despite your gentle meal. Nearby, a group debates the best methods for preparing meats for those without teeth. Slow cooking until tender or marinating in acidic wines to break down tough fibers. It's a lively exchange that highlights how food and adaptation were intertwined. A wiry old man shares an unusual tip with a young woman boiling herbs like chamomile or fennel with honey, then spreading the mixture over hard cheese to soften it enough for easy eating. This creative workaround is just one example of how medieval inns were places of ingenuity, blending nutrition, comfort, and survival. Outside, the sun climbs higher, birds chirping in the fresh morning air as the village awakens fully. You breathe deeply, savoring the cool, dew-scented breeze that brushes your face. There's a peacefulness here, a brief pause between journeys, a moment to gather strength. You finish your gruel slowly, the last warm spoonful, a reminder that nourishment isn't always about grand feasts or bold flavors. Sometimes it's about the quiet kindness of a soft meal served in a humble place, a simple gesture that means the world when your body demands gentleness. As you rise to prepare for the road ahead, you carry with you the knowledge that the inns were more than just resting spots. They were hubs of care and adaptation, where travelers learned to survive, not just through strength, but through softness, patience, and shared wisdom. And as the door closes behind you, the smell of wood smoke and spiced ale fading, you step forward with a gentle smile, knowing that even without teeth, the road will offer comfort in unexpected ways. The road ahead stretches endlessly under a pale morning sky, soft with the light mist that clings like a whispered promise of a new day. You walk steadily each step, stirring the fine dust that settles like a gentle veil over the worn path. The world around you breathes slowly awake. The songs of birds ripple through the cool air, and a distant bell tolls from a village nestled between rolling hills. You feel the earth beneath your feet, solid yet forgiving, and it seems to hold the stories of every traveler who has ever passed this way, toothless or not. Your mouth feels tender, reminding you gently of the meals that have sustained you, the warm pottage that filled your belly last night, thick and smooth, and the soft gruel from this morning, a creamy embrace against the chill. These meals weren't just about nourishment. They were acts of kindness, crafted with care by innkeepers who understood that not every traveler could crunch, chew, or bite. For many, food was a challenge, a test of patience and creativity, and these simple dishes were the quiet heroes of survival. As you walk, you recall how medieval inns were more than just places to eat. They were sanctuaries. Within their stone walls and low-timbered roofs, people from all walks of life converged. Merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and peasants alike shared these spaces, their voices mingling in a tapestry of stories. You remember the warm glow of the hearth, the clink of ceramic mugs, and the low hum of laughter and conversation that soothed the soul as much as the food soothed the stomach. One particularly lively corner of the inn had been abuzz with discussion about the best ways to soften tough meats for those without teeth, slow cooking until the fibers fell apart, soaking in acidic wine, or even pounding the meat into a paste. These culinary workarounds revealed the inventiveness born of necessity. Food was adapted, transformed, and made gentle enough to be enjoyed by all, regardless of their physical limitations. You think about the herbal remedies mentioned in the conversations, bitter leaves boiled down to soothe inflamed gums, honey drizzled over soft cheese to ease the bite. Some historians still debate whether these remedies truly healed or simply comforted the weary and aching, but you know from experience that the line between medicine and kindness is often thin. There was humor, too, tucked into those dim corners of the inn, a shared laughter over lost teeth and misadventures on the road. You can't help but smile as you remember an old man's story about a brawl that ended with more than bruises, leaving him with a smile that no longer had all its teeth, but plenty of character. It's a reminder that even in hardship, the human spirit finds lightness. The day grows warmer as the sun rises higher, casting long shadows that dance with the breeze. The scent of wildflowers and fresh earth mingles with the distant smoke from a hearth. You pause beneath a spreading oak tree, its leaves rustling softly above, offering shade and a moment's rest. The peaceful sounds around you, the murmur of a nearby brook, the flutter of wings, the soft crackle of twigs seem to hush the world, inviting you to slow down and breathe. As you sit, you reflect on how these soft meals and gentle places were vital threads in the fabric of medieval travel. Without teeth, the road was tougher, the journey longer, and yet the inn's care turned hardship into endurance. These simple acts of preparation and adaptation, a pot of thick pottage, a bowl of smooth gruel, a spoonful of softened fruit, spoke of humanity's quiet triumph over physical limits. With the road stretching on and the sun climbing steadily, you rise again, feeling the strength of those who traveled before you. The world may be vast and the journey long, but you carry with you the warmth of those humble inns, the taste of their kindness, and the resilience of travelers who knew that survival was not just about teeth or toughness, but about softness, care, and the gentle art of nourishment. You take a final look back toward the village, fading behind the trees, the memory of soft meals and shared stories lingering like a comforting melody. Then you step forward, steady and sure, ready to meet whatever the road has in store, your heart lighter and your spirit steadier with every quiet step. The sun has risen fully now, warming the earth with a gentle golden glow that spills over rolling fields and ancient hedgerows. You walk along the winding path, the soft crunch of gravel beneath your boots, mingling with the distant hum of birdsong and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. The air is rich with the scents of wildflowers and fresh grass wrapping around you like a quiet invitation to slow down and simply be. As you move forward, your thoughts linger on the inns you've left behind, those humble havens of warmth and care where the weary traveler found more than just a place to rest. You think about the meals served there, especially those crafted with gentle hands for mouths like yours missing teeth, but still eager to savor the comforts of food. Medieval inns were remarkable in how they adapted to their guests' needs, especially when it came to feeding those who could not chew the usual fare. Instead of offering the hard, crusty bread and tough meat often associated with medieval diets, these inns transformed ingredients into soft, nourishing dishes. They were places of quiet, culinary ingenuity, where stews simmered for hours until every morsel became tender enough to melt in the mouth. Root vegetables were mashed into creamy purees, and dried fruits were soaked until their skins softened, creating bursts of gentle sweetness. It was a different kind of feast, one made not for grandeur, but for survival and comfort. A particularly interesting historical detail you recall is that some inns maintained specialized recipes specifically for those with dental difficulties. These were no grand royal cookbooks, but practical collections, simple, effective guides that ensured every guest, regardless of their physical limitations, could enjoy a meal. This small but significant tradition reveals a medieval hospitality more thoughtful and inclusive than we might expect. Now here's a charming bit of medieval trivia. Some inns reportedly offered what you might call toothless menus. These weren't menus printed on parchment, but rather a system or word of mouth that guided guests toward dishes that would be easier to eat without teeth. It's a delightful thought, innkeepers quietly taking care of guests by steering them toward food that would soften the day's journey. Historians still debate how common this practice was, or whether it's a bit of folklore sprinkled with some truth. But the very idea paints a warm picture of care and attention in a world often assumed harsh and unyielding. You come upon a quiet brook that sings softly as it slips over smooth stones. You pause, dipping your hands into the cool water, the refreshing chill a sharp contrast to the warming sun on your face. It's a small moment, but it feels deeply restorative, as if the earth itself is tending to your needs alongside the inns and their softened foods. Another story floats to your mind, this one told by a grizzled old innkeeper from a mountain village. During long, bitter winters, when fresh produce was scarce, he said some inns would enrich their stews with crushed nuts or softened bread to thicken the meal and stretch it further. These improvised dishes were a lifeline, ensuring no traveler went hungry, even those without teeth or with weak stomachs. Such resourcefulness reminds you that survival often depends on kindness and creativity rather than abundance. As you stand by the brook, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoes from the village beyond the trees. The rhythmic ringing is a steady heartbeat of life, a reminder that these crossroads are places of labor and community, of continuity amid change. You feel yourself part of that rhythm, connected to the steady pulse of everyday existence that has welcomed travelers like you for centuries. You brush a stray twig from your sleeve and continue down the path, knowing that soon you will find another inn, a new hearth to warm your body, and a soft meal to soothe your mouth and spirit. The road stretches on, but it no longer feels daunting. Each step is a quiet promise, a gentle movement forward, cushioned by the kindness of those who prepared the meals before you and those who will welcome you again. The journey is long and often unpredictable, but it is softened by these moments of care, these small acts of kindness passed down through generations. You walk on with a calm heart and steady breath, wrapped in the enduring comfort of soft food, warm inns, and the understanding that even without teeth, you are never truly alone on the road. The road stretches ahead, bathed in the soft golden light of late morning as you trudge on with steady steps. The gentle rustle of leaves overhead mixes with the distant chatter of birds settling into their day, creating a quiet symphony of the countryside waking up. The air carries the faint scent of wildflowers and damp earth, comforting and familiar, as if the landscape itself breathes a welcome. You think back to the inns you've passed, their sturdy stone walls and timbered roofs sheltering travelers of all kinds. But what stays with you most is how these inns served those who couldn't bite into their meals, those missing teeth yet craving warmth and sustenance. Their kitchens were small but mighty workshops of care, where cooks transformed coarse ingredients into tender, nourishing food fit for every mouth. One well-known fact about medieval inns is how they balanced hospitality with practicality. Meals had to be simple, filling, and easy to digest, especially for the elderly or ill who often traveled. Stews and pottages were slow cooked for hours, turning tough cuts of meat into tender morsels that dissolved at the slightest touch of the tongue. Root vegetables, often abundant in the region, were mashed into creamy textures, sometimes sweetened with honey or softened fruits to make them more palatable. These dishes weren't just meals, they were comfort served in a bowl. Interestingly, some inns took this care a step further by customizing their fare. While it might sound surprising, there's historical evidence that certain inns offered dishes specifically suited for guests with dental troubles. This wasn't just about kindness, but also about good business. Happy guests were more likely to stay rest and share their positive experiences. You can almost imagine an innkeeper gently suggesting a soft broth over a crusty loaf to a weary traveler, the subtle art of hospitality in action. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some inns reportedly used what we might call toothless menus, not written menus as we think of them today, but coded ways to help guests identify which dishes required little or no chewing. It's a playful, practical solution that adds a human touch to the often harsh realities of medieval travel. Historians still argue whether these were widespread or more of a charming anecdote passed down through the years, but the idea captures the spirit of care that defined these places. The scents of the countryside mingle with the hum of life nearby. A blacksmith's steady hammer strikes iron, and the faint clatter of wooden carts echoes along the road. You pause beside a wildflower patch, the soft petals brushing your fingertips as you reflect on how these inns acted as hubs for local communities. They connected farmers, craftsmen, and travelers, weaving a network of support that extended beyond just meals. The foods served were often sourced from local farms, meaning fresh ingredients were more common than you might guess. Seasonal vegetables. Fruits, herbs, and freshly baked bread made their way into the kitchens, where they were lovingly prepared to suit every guest's needs. During harsh winters, when fresh produce was scarce, innkeepers showed their ingenuity, thickening stews with crushed nuts or softened grains, creating meals both filling and gentle. You recall a curious story from an old innkeeper in times of famine or hardship. Some inns even soaked bread overnight in broth or wine, turning it into a soft, palatable dish for those too weak to chew. This practice wasn't just a culinary trick, it was a lifeline. Such resourcefulness underlines the deep compassion that infused these places, softening not just food, but the very experience of travel. As you continue down the path, the village ahead comes into view, smoke curling from chimneys, the faint clatter of daily life. You feel the comforting pull of another inn, its promise of rest and gentle nourishment, a balm after long miles. The knowledge that these places existed for travelers like you, offering meals made tender by patience and care, wraps around you like a warm shawl. The journey stretches onward, but with every step you carry the legacy of those medieval inns, places where even the toothless found comfort, where food was not just sustenance, but a quiet kindness, and where every traveler was met with a softness that eased the road ahead. The afternoon sun stretches long fingers of light across the worn, dusty road as you continue your slow journey. The warmth settles gently on your shoulders, and the soft whisper of a breeze carries the subtle sense of fresh herbs and baking bread from a nearby village. You can hear the faint murmur of voices, the clatter of wooden carts, and the rhythmic tapping of shoes on cobblestones ahead, signs of life, comfort, and perhaps once again an inn just within reach. As you walk, your mind drifts back to the inns you've passed, those small havens that transformed simple ingredients into meals that didn't demand teeth, only patience and love. You think about the kitchens behind those heavy wooden doors where cooks worked quietly to soften meats and mash vegetables until they became warm, gentle nourishment. These kitchens were not just about filling bellies. They were places of compassion, adapting the tough realities of medieval food for every guest who arrived. One of the more well-known facts about medieval inns is how integral the preparation of soft foods was for travelers who were elderly, ill, or simply toothless. Stews simmered for hours, tenderizing even the toughest cuts of meat until they practically dissolved in the mouth. Root vegetables were boiled and mashed, often mixed with sweet fruits or creamy dairy to ease swallowing. Bread, a staple of the time, was softened in broths or wines to make it easier to eat. This was food designed not for show, but for survival and comfort, simple, slow-cooked meals that could sustain a body and soothe a weary spirit. A fascinating and slightly quirky detail is that some inns reportedly kept what could be called soft food guides for their cooks, informal instructions on how to prepare meals suitable for toothless guests. While historians still debate how widespread and formalized these guides were, the very idea shows how hospitality was layered with thoughtful care. Inns weren't just about feeding. They were about adapting, accommodating, and ensuring that no traveler was left behind simply because they couldn't chew. The role of herbs in these soft dishes is another charming element. Many cooks infused their broths and porridges with herbs like mint, chamomile, and fennel, not only for flavor, but also for their soothing and digestive properties. Whether these herbal additions were scientifically effective or rooted more in medieval beliefs remains a topic of scholarly debate, but they add a fragrant, almost medicinal softness to the meals served. You can almost smell the mingling of earth and sweetness as the kitchen fires glow low. You pass a simple herb garden tucked beside a stone wall, its leaves whispering secrets in the breeze. It's easy to picture innkeepers gently harvesting these plants, knowing each leaf and root could make a meal gentler, a throat calmer, a body stronger. This connection between kitchen and garden speaks of a deeper understanding, one not just about hunger, but about healing and kindness. Local farmers, too, were part of this web of care, providing fresh vegetables, grains, and occasionally dairy, all crucial for preparing soft meals. Their harvests changed with the seasons, so inns had to be flexible, adapting recipes to what the land could offer. During the lean months, when fresh produce was scarce, stews were thickened with crushed nuts, soaked bread, or even ground grains, transforming modest ingredients into filling fare that still required little chewing. A lingering scholarly question about these practices is how universal they were. Did every inn in medieval Europe accommodate toothless guests with specially softened foods? Or was this kindness a privilege of more prosperous regions or wealthier travelers? The evidence is patchy, but it's clear that where hospitality thrived, there was a strong impulse to care for all bodies, even those missing teeth. Ahead, the village grows nearer smoke, rising softly from chimneys like gentle signals of warmth and welcome. The smells of baking bread and simmering broth drift toward you, tugging at your senses and inviting you to rest. You imagine stepping inside, shedding the dust of the road, and settling by the fire with a bowl of smooth pottage, the steam rising like a promise of comfort. These inns, with their softened foods and quiet kindness, have been silent companions on your journey bridges between the harshness of travel and the solace of rest. They remind you that even the humblest meal, when made with care, carries the power to soothe pain and ease loneliness. As the path winds on, you carry with you the memory of those tender dishes, the soft textures, the gentle flavors, and the knowledge that in a world often rough and unforgiving, small acts of culinary kindness have long helped travelers like you find rest and renewal. The late afternoon sun filters softly through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the uneven path beneath your feet. You feel the earth's gentle pulse beneath you, the quiet rhythm of the countryside, inviting you to slow your pace. The air is cool now, touched by the scent of wildflowers and damp moss, a delicate blend that feels like a whispered promise of comfort after the long day's travel. Somewhere not far off, the gentle gurgle of a stream laces with the distant murmur of voices from a village settling into evening. As you walk, your thoughts circle back to the inns that have been your resting places, those quiet havens where food and kindness came together like an old lullaby. These inns were never grand palaces, but warm, simple shelters where travelers found more than just shelter, they found understanding. The hearth fires burned low but steady. The wooden beams creaked softly overhead, and the flickering candlelight softened the edges of the world outside, offering a reprieve from the journey's roughness. The food in these inns was more than sustenance. It was a carefully crafted comfort, especially for those who arrived without teeth to chew. You recall how innkeepers and cooks adapted their meals to meet the needs of every guest. Tender stews simmered until the meat was so soft it melted with the gentlest touch of the tongue. Thick, creamy porridges and mashed root vegetables filled wooden bowls promising warmth and nourishment without the challenge of biting or grinding. It was a quiet, unspoken kindness, a way of saying, "You are cared for here no matter your condition." One well-known historical fact is that inns in medieval Europe often had to cater to a wide variety of guests, from robust merchants with keen appetites to frail elders whose teeth had long since left them behind. The challenge of feeding such diverse travelers led to a culture of adaptability in kitchen practices. Simple ingredients like barley oats and seasonal vegetables became the building blocks for meals that were easy to eat yet nourishing. These weren't meals designed to dazzle, but meals designed to restore strength and soothe the weary. A quirky and unexpected detail is that some inns were known to prepare soft, sweet dishes made from milk, honey, and eggs, early versions of custards and creams. These delicate treats, though not common everywhere, were a special comfort for toothless travelers, their smooth textures offering a gentle sweetness that few could resist. Historians still debate how widespread these delicacies were, but their existence adds a softer, almost tender dimension to the medieval inn experience. You notice a small cluster of wild blackberries hanging heavy on their branches, their dark sweetness nearly bursting in the late sun. It's easy to imagine these berries crushed and stirred into porridges or broths, adding a touch of natural sweetness and a burst of vitamins. This small act of incorporating local fresh ingredients speaks to the deeper connection between inn kitchens and the land that fed them. Farmers and gatherers were the unseen heroes of this food chain, providing fresh produce, grains, and dairy to keep the inns stocked throughout the changing seasons. Their work ensured that even when fresh ingredients were scarce, there was always something soft and nourishing available, whether that was a thick oat porridge enriched with wild herbs or a broth simmered with whatever root vegetables were on hand. This partnership between village and inn was a lifeline for travelers, making every meal a quiet act of community care. An ongoing scholarly debate focuses on how much these soft food practices varied across different regions and social classes. Did poorer inns offer the same thoughtful accommodations for toothless guests? Or was this a comfort reserved for wealthier travelers? The historical record is incomplete, but from what you gather, a culture of hospitality permeated many levels of medieval society, even if quality and availability varied. As twilight deepens, you see the soft glow of another inn ahead, its windows casting warm pools of light onto the cobblestones. The familiar scent of burning wood and baking bread invites you closer, promising rest and a meal that will ease the day's weariness. You imagine stepping inside the door, closing softly behind you, the warmth wrapping around you like a gentle embrace. In these moments, the simple meals of soft stew and sweet custard become more than food. They are acts of kindness passed down through generations. They remind you that no matter how rough the world may be, there is always room for tenderness and care, especially when you least expect it. Your steps slow, your breath evens out, and the memory of these gentle, tooth-friendly meals lingers, a quiet comfort, a soft echo of humanity's enduring kindness in a world that often seems harsh and unyielding. Night falls softly around you, a velvet curtain sprinkled with stars, wrapping the world in its quiet embrace. The air cools, carrying whispers of pine and earth, mingling with the distant calls of night birds. Your footsteps slow naturally, the uneven path beneath you softened by layers of moss and fallen leaves. It's the kind of night where the world seems to hold its breath, perfect for thinking about the gentle refuge that medieval inns provided after a long day on the road. You imagine stepping once again through the heavy wooden door of an inn where the warmth of the hearth reaches out like an old friend's hug. The room glows golden with flickering candlelight shadows dancing softly across rough-hewn beams and worn stone walls. Travelers gathered here are a curious blend of souls, pilgrims wrapped in threadbare cloaks, merchants with pockets full of coins, local farmers smelling of hay and earth. Despite their differences, they share a quiet understanding. This is a place to rest, to replenish, to find comfort. Historically, medieval inns were far more than mere lodging. They were vibrant hubs of social life, where news traveled faster than horses and stories spun as richly as the wines served at the table. Food played a crucial role in this tapestry, not just for nourishment, but as a symbol of hospitality and community. The kitchens catered not only to the strong and healthy, but thoughtfully to those who struggled with eating, such as the elderly or the sick who needed soft, gentle foods that could be swallowed easily without teeth. Innkeepers and cooks took pride in this adaptability. The menus were modest but clever, featuring dishes designed to ease digestion and soothe tired mouths. Thick porridges made from oats or barley simmered slowly over open fires until silky smooth. Stews rich with tender root vegetables and softened meats filled wooden bowls with comforting warmth. Bread was often soaked in broths or milk to soften its tough crusts, making it easier for anyone to eat without strain. This care wasn't just practical, it was an unspoken kindness, a quiet reassurance that every guest mattered. One charming, slightly quirky, historical tidbit is that some inns prepared sweetened milk-based dishes resembling early custards. These treats were soft, smooth, and mildly flavored with honey or herbs, making them perfect for guests who couldn't manage harder fare. Though historians debate how commonly these desserts were served, their existence hints at a sweeter, gentler side to medieval hospitality, almost like a lullaby for the stomach. As you walk, you notice a small clearing bathed in moonlight, wild herbs growing quietly among the stones. These fresh ingredients were essential to inn kitchens, adding not just flavor, but health benefits to dishes. Herbs like mint thyme and chamomile might have been steeped into teas or infused into broths, aiding digestion and calming nerves, a medieval version of modern comfort food and drink. Behind the scenes, a network of farmers, gatherers, and local suppliers worked to keep inns stocked with fresh produce, grains, and dairy. This seasonal rhythm meant that innkeepers had to be creative, adjusting menus to what the land offered at any given time. It was a relationship built on trust and necessity, where the well-being of travelers rested on the careful balance of nature and human care. A fascinating debate among scholars centers on how consistent these practices were across regions and social classes. Did poorer inns manage the same level of care for toothless guests as wealthier ones? Some evidence suggests that while quality varied, the ethos of hospitality was widespread. Even the humblest inns aimed to offer comfort within their means, showing that kindness was not solely the privilege of the rich. You imagine the inn's gentle buzz, a hum of quiet conversations, the soft clatter of bowls and spoons, the occasional low laughter from a relieved traveler. It's a sound that speaks of safety and shared humanity, where even the smallest gestures, like preparing a soft meal, carry deep meaning. As you draw nearer to an inn glowing warmly in the distance, the door creaks open, releasing a breath of fragrant steam and warm air scented with herbs and baking bread. You step inside the world's troubles left behind the threshold. A bowl of thick, silky stew is placed before you, its steam curling invitingly, promising ease and comfort, without the need for teeth, only patience and gentle savoring. In these quiet moments, you realize that the soft foods of medieval inns were more than mere survival fare. They were acts of care passed from one person to another, bridging gaps of pain, weariness, and loneliness. They remind you that in every era, kindness can be found in the gentlest details, like a warm bowl, a soft spoonful, and a hearth fire's glow. With the stars twinkling steadily overhead, you feel the peace settle deep inside you. The journey continues, but for now, the inn's tender hospitality wraps you in a quiet, soft embrace, guiding you gently toward rest and renewal. The road ahead fades softly beneath your feet as you lean into the night's quiet. The scent of damp earth and crushed leaves fills the air, and somewhere nearby the faint hoot of an owl echoes a gentle reminder that you are never truly alone on this path. As you breathe in this peaceful atmosphere, your mind drifts to how medieval inns managed not only the physical needs of travelers, but also their emotional well-being, offering a kind of soft sanctuary where body and spirit could rest together. Step inside a typical inn, and you're greeted by a scene that feels surprisingly familiar. The flicker of candlelight bounces off wooden beams, casting warm shadows over a room buzzing with quiet conversation and occasional laughter. The innkeeper, an experienced soul with a ready smile, moves gracefully through the space, attending to guests with practiced ease. Here, everyone is seen not just as a customer, but as a person whose journey matters. One main historical fact is that inns in the medieval period often functioned as informal community centers. Beyond just food and shelter, they were places where travelers exchanged news, locals gathered for games and storytelling, and sometimes even courts convened for local disputes. This lively social role meant that the atmosphere needed to be welcoming to all, including those with special needs, such as toothless elders or travelers recovering from illness. Food was central to this social warmth. Soft, easy-to-eat dishes were a quiet promise that no one would be left out. Thick pottages, mashed vegetables, and tender meats were staples, ensuring that even those without teeth could nourish themselves without discomfort. The skill lay not just in cooking, but in knowing how to care, how to transform simple ingredients into meals that were gentle on the body, but rich in comfort. A quirky detail from some accounts describes how certain inns would prepare mead breads, soft, honey-sweetened cakes soaked in spiced wine or mead. These treats were often reserved for special guests or festive occasions, and were particularly appreciated by those who couldn't manage regular bread. Historians debate the prevalence of such delicacies, but their mention offers a glimpse into the more playful, celebratory side of inn cuisine. Imagine the soft clink of wooden spoons against bowls, the gentle murmur of voices sharing stories of distant lands or recent adventures. The inn's hearth crackles, sending gentle warmth through the room. You see the faces around you, some marked by age, some by the dust of the road, but all softened by the kindness found here. This blend of community and care made inns a vital respite on long, lonely journeys. The importance of drink in these settings cannot be overlooked. Herbal infusions, warm milk, and diluted wines were common chosen for their soothing qualities and ease of swallowing. A toothless traveler could cradle a warm cup between their hands, feeling its heat seep slowly into their bones, a small ritual of comfort that turned a simple drink into a balm for the soul. Behind the scenes, the effort to provide these comforts was considerable. Cooks often worked from dawn, preparing meals that could be quickly adapted for different needs. Recipes were passed down sometimes, written often remembered by heart, a blend of tradition and improvisation. The adaptability of medieval inn cuisine reflects a deep understanding of hospitality, one that prioritized the human experience over rigid menus or culinary showmanship. Scholars continue to discuss how regional differences influenced these practices. Did coastal inns with access to fresh fish offer softer seafood dishes? Were mountain inns more reliant on root vegetables and dairy? The answers vary, but the common thread remains the commitment to making every guest feel nourished and cared for, no matter their circumstances. As you walk on the image of the inn's soft light and warm meals lingers a gentle memory to carry with you. These places weren't just way stations, but little pockets of kindness in a sometimes harsh world where even those without teeth could find food that comforted and restored. With every step, the peaceful night roused more tightly around you, a lullaby sung by the earth and sky. The inns of the past, with their soft meals and warm welcomes, remind you that sometimes the simplest acts of care are the most profound. In that quiet thought, you find yourself moving forward, carried by the gentle rhythm of history's embrace. The night air cools softly around you as the world slows into a gentle hush, the faint rustle of leaves blending with the distant song of crickets. Your footsteps fall lightly on the worn path, and the thoughts of medieval inns linger in your mind like a comforting memory, places not just of shelter, but of thoughtful care, especially for those who could no longer bite or chew as they once did. Imagine yourself stepping once again through that heavy door, the warm glow of the hearth washing over you like a soft, familiar blanket. Medieval life was rough, and teeth were no exception to that rule. Cavities, infections, and the wear of coarse food meant that many travelers, especially the elderly or the poor, often found themselves with few or no teeth left. You probably wouldn't survive long, chewing on the typical medieval fare of tough bread and dense meats if you lacked a strong bite. But the inns, those vital waypoints on the road, knew this all too well. They adapted. One firm historical fact is that medieval inns took special care to offer food that was easy to consume without teeth. Thick porridges made from oats, barley, or even finely milled grains were simmered for hours until creamy and smooth. Sometimes enriched with milk broth or honey, these porridges could be both filling and gentle on a weary mouth. For those without teeth, this was no mere convenience. It was a lifeline, a way to nourish themselves after a long day's journey. Think about the textures involved: a soft, almost velvety porridge that slips easily down your throat, warming you from the inside out. The cooks didn't just throw ingredients into a pot. They carefully balanced flavor and consistency, understanding that a meal's softness could be the difference between exhaustion and renewed energy. The kitchen was a place of quiet innovation where tradition met necessity in pots bubbling over open flames. A quirky and rather delightful historical tidbit involves almond milk, a luxury ingredient often used in medieval cooking, especially in desserts and softer foods. Almond milk was a soothing alternative to dairy, especially useful for those who might have digestive difficulties or simply lacked teeth to chew solid food. Mixed with honey and fragrant spices like cinnamon or rosewater almond milk-based custards and creams offered a sweet, smooth treat. Although historians still argue about how widespread almond milk was outside the wealthier classes, it clearly represented an early version of comfort food, silky sweet and easy to swallow. You can almost hear the soft clink of wooden spoons scraping gently against bowls, the low murmur of voices sharing stories softened by the calm of the night. In some inns, cooks even carved spoons wider and shallower to accommodate the needs of those with difficulty chewing or swallowing. This small but meaningful adjustment speaks volumes about the medieval sense of hospitality, a deep awareness of individual needs beneath the surface bustle. It's easy to imagine a traveler, weary and toothless, receiving such a bowl with a quiet nod of gratitude, the warm steam rising gently, carrying scents of honey and spice. The meal is modest, but generous in spirit, a gesture of care and respect. Such details remind us that hospitality then, as now, was as much about kindness as it was about sustenance. Medieval inns also often provided warm, herbal infusions alongside these soft foods. Chamomile mint and fennel teas were common, offering calming properties and aiding digestion. For travelers worn thin by the road and worry, these simple brews could be a gentle embrace, a liquid lullaby to soothe nerves and ease the belly. Drinking slowly from a wooden cup, the heat spreading through tired hands, was an experience as important as the food itself. Behind this tender scene, a complex web of relationships supported the inn's soft food offerings. Local farmers supplied fresh grains, and dairy gatherers brought herbs from nearby woods, and bakers provided breads that could be softened or soaked as needed. This seasonal local network ensured that even modest inns could adjust menus to what the land generously provided, softening ingredients when necessary. Scholars still debate the consistency of these practices across regions and social classes. Did poorer inns really manage to offer such tender care, or was it a luxury of more affluent establishments? Some argue that the core values of hospitality transcended wealth, and that even the humblest innkeepers tried to soften the rough edges of travel for every guest. Others suggest that quality and options depended heavily on location and clientele. Whatever the truth, the shared goal remained clear: to offer a haven where all could rest and heal. As you continue along the moonlit path, the image of these inns glows softly in your mind, a symbol of gentle care in a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. The soft foods they served were more than nourishment. They were a language of comfort, a small kindness extended to those who needed it most. And as the stars watch silently overhead, you feel wrapped in that same kindness, carried forward on a wave of warmth and quiet grace. The first soft blush of dawn stretches slowly across the sky, turning the horizon into a watercolor wash of gentle pinks, peaches, and golds. You walk along a quiet country lane, the earth beneath your feet still cool and yielding from the night's dew. The images of medieval inns, their flickering hearths, and thick, creamy porridges linger warmly in your mind like a comforting echo. As the new day unfolds, you begin to sense how these inns were far more than mere resting spots. They were sanctuaries of kindness, care, and subtle healing, especially for travelers weakened by the road or missing the simple ability to chew their food. You probably didn't realize that medieval inns often doubled as places of healing, especially along well-traveled pilgrimage routes or near bustling market towns. It's a historical fact that many inns maintained a small collection of herbal remedies, and some even had a resident barber surgeon or healer on call. These inns cared not only for the traveler's body, but also for their spirit. If you arrived toothless, weak, or ill, there was often someone nearby to offer advice or gentle treatments alongside a soft meal. This holistic approach to hospitality shows a remarkable depth of empathy woven quietly into medieval travel culture. Imagine yourself stepping inside one of these inns on a chilly morning. The hearth crackles warmly, filling the room with a smoky scent that mingles with fragrant herbs hanging from the rafters. The innkeeper greets you kindly and offers a bowl of meat broth, a golden, fragrant liquid that has been simmered for hours until the meat is tender enough to fall apart at a mere touch. This broth was often the first food offered to travelers recovering from sickness or those whose teeth no longer served them. Historians still argue about how common such rich broths were for the everyday traveler versus wealthier guests. But one thing is clear: these slow-cooked dishes were a beloved staple of medieval comfort food. This broth isn't just nourishment, it's a gentle balm. The warmth spreads slowly through your body as you sip, quieting the ache of tired muscles and soothing a rumbling stomach. The innkeeper, knowing the hardship of travel and the weakness of toothless mouths, has taken care to prepare this meal with patience and kindness. It's a gesture that goes beyond food. It's an embrace, a silent promise of welcome. Here's a quirky detail to brighten your imagination. Some inns served soft eggs or egg-based custards, often flavored with honey saffron or herbs like mint. These dishes were soft enough to swallow without chewing and sweet enough to bring a moment of joy to weary travelers. Such delicate preparations suggest that medieval cooks weren't just focused on sustenance. They sought to bring pleasure and ease to those who needed it most. It's a reminder that even centuries ago, food was an art of care and comfort. The social life within these inns played a vital role in easing the loneliness of the road. Picture a common table where travelers from merchants to pilgrims gather around shared bowls and loaves. Even those without teeth could participate fully in this community, finding companionship in the quiet murmur of voices and the warmth of shared firelight. Food in this setting was a language of inclusion, a way to bond and heal not just bodies, but spirits. Of course, scholars still debate how much these compassionate practices varied across different regions and social strata. Did poorer inns manage to offer such gentle care, or was this kindness a luxury reserved for the more affluent? Some evidence suggests that inns known for their hospitality attracted a diverse clientele, including those who needed soft foods and quiet kindness the most. Others argue that the level of care depended heavily on the inn's location and wealth. Whatever the case, the shared goal of comfort and welcome seems to have been a universal aspiration. Beyond the food and company, medieval inns also embraced the power of rituals to soothe and prepare travelers for rest. Before settling down, many guests would partake in warm, herbal infusions, chamomile, lavender, or mint teas that eased digestion and calmed nerves. These simple drinks were a form of gentle care, a nightly lullaby in a cup. Imagine holding the wooden cup in your hands, feeling its warmth seep into your skin, the fragrant steam rising softly to your face. It's a sensory experience that transcends time, inviting you to relax and let go. As you continue your slow walk into the new day, carrying the lingering warmth of these stories with you, you understand how medieval inns, with their thick porridges, rich broths, and sweet custards, were places of profound kindness. They were more than just buildings. They were beacons of humanity, where every traveler, toothless or not, could find nourishment, rest, and the gentle embrace of hospitality. And so the story folds softly around you, like a well-worn quilt, stitching together moments of care across centuries, inviting you to rest your mind and heart in its gentle warmth. The sun climbs steadily into the sky, its gentle warmth spilling over the countryside, bathing the world in a soft golden light. You continue your journey, footsteps quiet on the dusty road, thoughts still lingering on the comforting inns and their humble, tender care for travelers without teeth. The story weaves itself around you like a soft blanket, threads of simmering broths, honey-sweetened custards, and the warm, smoky glow of firesides mingling with the quiet murmur of shared stories. In these moments, you realize that medieval inns were more than just places to rest. They were havens of compassion, adaptability, and community. It's a solid historical fact that inns held a unique position within their local villages and towns. The innkeeper was often a figure of respect and trust, a guardian of hospitality, someone who understood the needs of weary travelers and who preserved knowledge not only of food, but of healing. Inns frequently doubled as informal centers of news and social connection. Imagine an inn as a small, cozy crossroads of the world where different people and stories converged, where the aroma of slow-cooked stews mingled with the warmth of human kindness. The innkeeper's role was more than just serving food and drink. It was about creating a space that welcomed all comers, including those who might be physically fragile or toothless. These inns often adapted their offerings to suit the guests' needs, crafting soft porridges, tender broths, and gentle custards. They sometimes even reserved special seats or tables for those requiring extra care, an arrangement affectionately known in some places as the toothless table. While the idea might sound peculiar to our modern ears, it represented a deeply respectful acknowledgement of the challenges faced by older or weaker travelers. This toothless table was a small but meaningful detail, one that reflects the humanity present in medieval hospitality. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was. Some believe it was a rare kindness reserved for special guests or those known in the community, while others argue that such care was more common than records suggest. What remains clear, however, is that medieval inns were flexible places shaped by the rhythms of life and the needs of their visitors. Now picture yourself sitting down at one of these tables. The candlelight flickers softly, casting shadows that dance across rough-hewn wooden beams. Around you, voices hum low and warm, carrying tales of distant lands, pilgrimages made and merchants' journeys. The air smells faintly of herbs, sage, thyme, and rosemary blending with the sweetness of baked bread and honey. You feel the gentle heat from the hearth wrapping around you like a soft shawl. On the table before you sits a bowl of tender broth, a cup of spiced almond milk, and a small dish of honey-sweetened custard. Each bite and sip is an act of quiet care, a soothing touch on a weary day. You notice how the food is easy to swallow, its textures soft and comforting rather than harsh or demanding. This is not just a meal, but a lullaby crafted in flavors and warmth. And here's a little quirky detail: in some inns, travelers with dental troubles were sometimes offered a sweet treat known as sack posset. This was a warm, creamy concoction made from spiced wine and curdled cream, a delicacy that could be gently spooned and savored without chewing. While it might sound like a dessert from a different era, it reveals how medieval cooks could turn simple ingredients into something tender, sweet, and memorable. Imagine the slow swirl of spices warming your senses, the creamy texture sliding easily down your throat. Beyond the food, these inns were places where the healing power of ritual and routine worked alongside nourishment. Before retiring for the night, many travelers enjoyed warm, herbal infusions, chamomile, lavender, or mint tea that eased digestion and calmed restless minds. These small comforts, often overlooked in history books, were the medieval equivalent of a bedtime story whispered by the flickering firelight. Of course, medieval life was not without its hardships, and scholars continue to debate how evenly these comforts were distributed. Did the poorest travelers receive the same gentle care, or was such kindness limited to those with a few coins to spare? Were there regions where the tradition of soft foods and special attention thrived while others remained harsh and unforgiving? The records are spotty, but the enduring image is one of humanity striving for kindness in a rough world. As you walk on the warmth of the sun on your face, you carry with you the quiet legacy of these inns, their soft foods, their welcoming fires, and their open hearts. They remind you that no matter how hard the road, there are places where kindness waits ready to soothe and sustain. You think back to the many travelers over the centuries who, like you, found rest in these inns' gentle embrace. Their stories echo softly through the ages, carried in the warmth of a bowl of broth, the sweetness of honeyed custard, and the tender ritual of a shared meal. Now, as the light fades slowly into a calm evening, you feel yourself drifting toward rest, wrapped in the comfort of these stories. The world of medieval inns closes around you like a soft sigh, inviting you to relax, to breathe, and to let the gentle rhythms of history lull you toward peaceful sleep. The story slows now, like a gentle river coming to rest. Imagine the warm glow of that inn's fire softening into embers the last flickers of light stretching out like a tender sigh. You feel your breath deepen the muscles around your jaw, relaxing as if the soft foods you've imagined have nourished every part of you, not just your body, but your heart. There's something profoundly calming in knowing that even long ago, travelers were cared for with gentle meals made just for them, meals that didn't demand teeth or strength, only the willingness to rest and be cared for. You might feel a slow warmth spreading through your chest, a quiet sense of connection to all those who centuries ago found comfort in the simplest kindnesses. So as your eyelids grow heavier and the world outside fades softly away, carry this feeling with you that care is timeless, and even the smallest acts, a bowl of soft porridge, a kind smile, a shared story can soothe the soul and cradle you gently into rest. Now let your mind drift slow and peaceful. Sweet dreams.